The thunder rolled across the Arizona desert like the hooves of 1,000 wild horses, each crash shaking the very foundations of Sam Morrison's weathered cabin. Lightning split the purple-black sky, illuminating the barren landscape in stark, ghostly flashes that made the saguaro cacti appear like silent sentinels standing guard against the storm's fury. Rain hammered the tin roof with such violence that Sam could barely hear his own thoughts over the relentless percussion. Sam pressed his face against the cracked window, watching sheets of water cascade down the glass like tears from heaven itself. At 53, he had witnessed countless storms sweep across this unforgiving land, but tonight's tempest felt different, angrier, more personal. The wind howled through the gaps in his cabin's walls, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else, something that made his weathered hands tremble as he gripped his coffee cup. The cabin creaked and groaned under the assault, its rough-hewn timbers protesting against forces beyond their endurance. Sam's home, if it could be called that, was a testament to solitude and neglect. The roof leaked in 3 places, forcing him to position metal buckets strategically around the single room. His bed, little more than a straw mattress on a crude wooden frame, occupied one corner, while a stone fireplace dominated the opposite wall. A few shelves held his meager possessions: a Bible his mother had given him 30 years ago, a photograph of his late wife Margaret, and a handful of books worn smooth by countless readings. The storm had been building all day, with dark clouds gathering on the horizon, like an army preparing for battle. Sam had spent the afternoon securing his few belongings and checking on his 3 remaining horses in the small stable he'd built behind the cabin. The animals, sensing the approaching tempest, had been restless, their eyes wide with primitive fear that Sam recognized all too well. As lightning illuminated the landscape once more, Sam caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. There, barely visible through the curtain of rain, was a small figure stumbling across the desert floor. The shape moved erratically, as if fighting against the wind and rain, occasionally disappearing entirely behind sheets of water before emerging again, closer to his cabin. Sam grabbed his oil lamp and rushed to the door, his heart pounding with a mixture of concern and caution. In these parts, strangers meant trouble more often than not. The Apache had been increasingly active in recent months, and tensions between the settlers and the native tribes had reached a boiling point. Only last week, he'd heard tell of a homestead burned to the ground just 20 miles south, its occupants never seen again. But as the figure drew closer, Sam's fears transformed into something else entirely. The stranger was small, too small to be a warrior or a threat. Through the driving rain, he could make out the silhouette of a child, a girl, he realized, staggering toward his cabin with the desperate determination of someone fleeing death itself. Sam threw open the door, immediately feeling the storm's full fury as wind and rain lashed against his face. The girl was perhaps 12 years old, her long black hair plastered against her skull. Her clothes, traditional Apache dress, he noted with a mixture of alarm and compassion, soaked through and clinging to her thin frame. She collapsed just 10 feet from his doorstep, her small body crumpling onto the muddy ground like a broken doll. Without hesitation, Sam plunged into the storm. The rain struck him like thousands of tiny bullets, and the wind threatened to knock him off his feet. But he pushed forward, driven by an instinct older than fear or prejudice. He scooped the girl into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, how fragile her small body seemed against his broad chest. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid, her skin pale and cold as morning frost. Sam carried her into the cabin, kicking the door shut behind him with his boot. The sudden silence, broken only by the storm's muffled roar, felt almost sacred as he laid her gently on his bed. In the lamplight, Sam could see the girl more clearly. She was beautiful in the way that children are beautiful, innocent, unmarked by the harsh realities that aged adults before their time. Her features were delicate, distinctly Apache, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline that spoke of noble heritage. Her dress, though soaked and muddy, was intricately beaded with patterns that Sam didn't recognize, but somehow understood spoke of tradition and ceremony. Sam's hands shook as he assessed her condition. Her lips were blue, and her breathing remained dangerously shallow. Hypothermia, he realized. She was dying of cold. Without thinking of propriety or the potential consequences of his actions, Sam began stripping away her wet clothing, wrapping her in his warmest blankets and positioning her near the fireplace. He stoked the fire until flames danced high in the hearth, casting warm orange light across the cabin's rough walls. The girl's breathing began to deepen, and color slowly returned to her cheeks. Sam found himself holding his breath, watching for any sign of improvement, any indication that his efforts weren't in vain. As the hours passed, Sam maintained his vigil, feeding the fire and checking on the girl's condition. He prepared a simple broth from the few vegetables he had on hand, hoping she might be able to take some nourishment when she woke. The storm continued its assault outside, but within the cabin a different kind of atmosphere had settled, one of quiet hope and unexpected tenderness. Near midnight, the girl's eyes fluttered open. They were the color of rich earth after rain, deep and intelligent, filled with wariness but also with something else, a recognition of kindness that transcended language and culture. She tried to sit up, but Sam gently pressed her back down, his voice soft and reassuring. "Easy there, little one," he whispered. "You're safe now, the storm can't hurt you here." The girl's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in her surroundings with the quick assessment of someone accustomed to danger. When her gaze settled on Sam, he saw the exact moment she realized what had happened, that this white man, this stranger, had saved her life. Sam offered her the warm broth, and after a moment's hesitation she accepted it, her small hands wrapping around the bowl with visible relief. They sat in comfortable silence, the storm raging outside while inside, two unlikely souls found themselves sharing a moment of perfect peace. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally claimed Sam, and he dozed in his chair beside the fire. When he woke, the first rays of sunlight were streaming through his window, and the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling with possibility. The girl was gone. Sam bolted upright in his chair, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The blankets lay neatly folded on his bed, and the bowl that had held the broth sat clean and empty on the small wooden table beside the fireplace. It was as if the girl had never existed, save for the lingering warmth in the cabin and the faint scent of sage that seemed to hang in the morning air. Panic seized him as he rushed to the door, throwing it open to survey the landscape beyond. The storm had transformed the desert into something almost unrecognizable. Where once the earth had been cracked and parched, now small streams ran between the rocks, and the air was thick with the sweet smell of rain-washed sage and creosote. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, creating a scene of such beauty that Sam momentarily forgot his concern for the missing girl. But only momentarily. "Girl!" he called out, his voice echoing across the vastness. "Where are you?" The silence that answered him was profound and unsettling. Sam examined the ground around his cabin, searching for tracks, for any sign of which direction she might have gone. The rain had washed away most traces, but near the door he found a single footprint in the mud, small, delicate, unmistakably hers. Sam's mind raced with possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Had she been afraid when she woke? Had she fled, thinking he meant her harm? Or worse, had someone taken her while he slept? The thought sent a chill down his spine. Apache warriors were known for their stealth, their ability to move like ghosts through the desert. If they had come for her? He shook his head, trying to dispel the dark thoughts. The girl had been sick, exhausted, barely conscious when he'd found her. Surely she wouldn't have wandered far into the desert alone, not after what she'd endured. But as he continued his search, expanding his circle around the cabin, Sam found no further trace of her passage. The morning stretched on, and with each passing hour, Sam's anxiety grew. He saddled his horse, a sturdy mare named Belle, and rode out into the desert, following the arroyos and washes where someone seeking water might naturally travel. The landscape, so beautiful in the early morning light, now seemed vast and threatening, full of hidden dangers and countless places where a small girl might lie injured or worse. As he rode, Sam found himself thinking about the girl's eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes that had looked at him with such trust and gratitude. He'd seen something in them that haunted him now, a depth of understanding that seemed far beyond her years. She had known somehow that he meant her no harm. That recognition had passed between them like a bridge spanning the gulf between their two worlds. Sam had lived alone for 5 years, ever since Margaret's death from consumption. In that time he'd grown accustomed to solitude, to the rhythm of his own thoughts and the predictable patterns of desert life. But the girl's brief presence had awakened something in him that he'd thought long buried, a capacity for care, for connection, for hope. The sun climbed higher, and the desert began to shimmer with heat waves that made the distant mountains dance like mirages. Sam's search took him farther from his cabin than he'd intended, following dry creek beds and rocky outcroppings where someone might seek shade. He called out periodically, his voice growing hoarse, but received no answer except the mocking cry of a hawk circling overhead. Near noon, exhaustion and concern finally drove him back toward his cabin. As he crested the small rise that overlooked his homestead, Sam pulled Belle to a stop, his mouth falling open in shock. The scene before him was like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. His cabin was surrounded by Apache warriors. Sam's blood turned to ice as he counted them, at least 20 men, all mounted, all armed, arranged in a loose circle around his property. They sat their horses with the easy grace of men born to the saddle, their weapons visible but not immediately threatening. At their center rode a figure that commanded respect even from a distance, an older man whose bearing and the deference of the others clearly marked him as a chief. For a moment, Sam considered flight. Belle was fast, and he might be able to reach the safety of town before the warriors could overtake him. But something held him in place, some instinct that whispered, this was not what it appeared to be. The Apache weren't attacking his cabin or ransacking his property. They were simply waiting. Taking a deep breath, Sam urged Belle forward down the slope. As he approached, the circle of warriors parted, creating a clear path to his cabin. The chief, a man of perhaps 60 years with steel-gray hair and eyes like chips of obsidian, watched Sam's approach with an expression that was impossible to read. Sam dismounted 20 feet from the chief, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow and deliberate. In the tense silence that followed, he could hear nothing but the whisper of wind through the sage and the distant cry of a coyote. When the chief finally spoke, his English was precise and unaccented, the words of a man who had learned the white man's language out of necessity rather than choice. "You are the one who found her," the chief said. It wasn't a question. Sam nodded, his throat too dry to speak. "My granddaughter tells me you showed her kindness," the chief continued, "that you saved her life when the storm would have claimed it." "She was just a child," Sam managed to say. "Any decent person would have done the same." The chief's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You speak of decency, but I have seen little of it from your people. My granddaughter wandered from our camp during the storm, seeking a lost puppy. We searched through the night, fearing the worst. When she returned this morning, she told us of a white man who asked for nothing in return for his kindness." Sam felt a wave of relief so profound, it made his knees weak. The girl was safe. She had made it back to her people. "I'm glad she's all right," Sam said. "That's all that matters." The chief studied him for a long moment, and Sam had the uncomfortable feeling of being measured against some invisible standard. Finally, the older man nodded as if Sam had passed some unspoken test. "My name is Nietzsche," the chief said, "and you, white man, have given me a gift beyond price. The safe return of my granddaughter is worth more than all the gold in your mountains." Sam opened his mouth to protest that he had done nothing special, but Nietzsche raised a hand, silencing him. "Among my people, a debt of honor must be repaid," the chief continued. "What you did cannot be answered with words alone." As if responding to some silent signal, the warriors began to dismount, and Sam noticed for the first time that several of them carried tools, hammers, saws, bundles of fresh timber. His confusion must have shown on his face, because Nietzsche smiled, the first genuine expression of warmth Sam had seen from him. "Your home is tired," Nietzsche said, gesturing toward the cabin. "It needs the care that only comes from grateful hearts. We have come to give you such a gift." Sam stared in bewilderment as the Apache warriors spread out around his property with the efficiency of a well-trained crew. What had moments before felt like a potential siege now transformed into something entirely different. A barn raising, an act of community cooperation that Sam had witnessed in his youth but never imagined he would experience in this desolate corner of the territory. Nietzsche dismounted with the fluid grace of a man half his age, his keen eyes surveying Sam's cabin with the assessment of someone who understood both construction and the harsh realities of desert living. The structure, Sam realized with embarrassment, must look pathetic to these men who could build entire villages from the materials the desert provided. "Your roof," Nietzsche observed, pointing to the obvious gaps where rain had found its way through. "It cries in the storms." Sam nodded, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "I've been meaning to fix it, but a man alone cannot be everywhere at once," Nietzsche finished, his tone carrying no judgment, only understanding. "This is why the Great Spirit gave us tribes, families, communities. No one is meant to face the world's challenges alone." As if summoned by the chief's words, more Apache appeared over the ridge, women and children, elders and young men, all carrying materials and tools. Sam watched in amazement as they approached, their movements coordinated without apparent communication, each person seemingly knowing exactly what needed to be done. Among them, Sam spotted the girl. She rode alongside a woman who bore such a strong resemblance to her that Sam immediately knew this must be her mother. The child's eyes found his across the gathering crowd, and she smiled, a radiant expression that seemed to light up the entire desert. She slipped from her horse and approached Sam with the shy confidence of a child who had been taught to respect strangers but not fear them. "Thank you," she said in carefully pronounced English, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the warm place, for the food, for seeing me as a person, not an enemy." The words struck Sam like a physical blow. How young she was to already understand such distinctions, to know that not all adults would have offered her the basic kindness he had shown. He knelt down to her level, his weathered hands gentle as he placed them on her shoulders. "What's your name, little one?" he asked. "Ayana," she replied. "It means eternal blossom in my language." "That's a beautiful name," Sam said. "I'm Sam, and I want you to know that you're always welcome here. Always." Ayana's smile widened, and she surprised Sam by throwing her arms around his neck in a brief, fierce hug before running back to her mother's side. The woman, tall, dignified, with the same intelligent eyes as her daughter, nodded to Sam with a respect that spoke volumes. Nietzsche approached, and Sam stood to face the chief. Around them, the organized chaos of construction was already beginning. Teams of men had begun dismantling the worst sections of his roof, while others sorted through the materials they had brought: fresh timber, clay tiles, tools that gleamed with recent care. "Your granddaughter," Sam said. "She's remarkable." "She is the future of our people," Nietzsche replied. "Smart, brave, but still learning that the world can be both cruel and kind, sometimes within the same day. You showed her kindness when you could have shown her fear or hatred. That lesson will stay with her always." Sam watched as the Apache worked with a precision and efficiency that spoke of generations of cooperation. The men who had removed the damaged roofing were already beginning to install new supports, while others worked on expanding the cabin's foundation. Women prepared food over carefully tended fires, creating a communal meal that filled the air with rich, savory scents. "I don't understand," Sam said. "This is too much. All you did," Nietzsche interrupted, "was risk your own safety to save a child who was not your own, who belonged to a people you have been taught to fear. In our culture, such an act creates a bond that cannot be broken by words or time." As the day progressed, Sam found himself drawn into the work despite his protests. The Apache treated him not as a recipient of charity, but as a partner in the construction, seeking his input on where he wanted windows placed, how he preferred the interior arranged, what improvements would serve him best. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a simple, rough cabin began to take shape as something more, a real home. The new roof was not merely functional, but beautiful, with clay tiles arranged in patterns that caught and reflected the desert light. The walls were reinforced and expanded, creating space for a proper kitchen, a sitting area, even a small room that could serve as a study or extra bedroom. But it was the smaller touches that moved Sam most profoundly. The women wove blankets with traditional Apache patterns, creating textiles that would not only provide warmth, but transform the stark interior into something welcoming and alive. The men carved details into the woodwork, subtle patterns that spoke of skill passed down through generations. Ayana appeared at Sam's side as he watched the roof taking shape. She carried a small bundle wrapped in soft doeskin, which she held out to him with ceremonial gravity. "This is for you," she said, "from my grandmother. She says a home needs protection, and this will keep the bad spirits away." Sam unwrapped the bundle to find a beautifully carved wooden figure, a spirit guardian, Ayana explained, that would watch over his home and bring him peace. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every detail perfect, from the figure's serene expression to the intricate patterns carved into its robes. "I can't accept something so valuable," Sam protested, but Ayana shook her head. "Grandmother says gifts must be given with an open heart and received the same way," she replied. "She also says the guardian chooses its own home and this one chose yours." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, the work neared completion. Sam's simple cabin had been transformed into something that seemed almost magical, a dwelling that belonged to the desert while providing comfort and security to its inhabitant. The Apache gathered around a central fire as the day's work concluded, sharing food and stories in a mixture of English and their native tongue. Sam found himself welcomed into their circle, treated not as an outsider, but as a friend, a neighbor, a member of an extended community he had never known existed. Naiche approached as the evening deepened, his expression serious but warm. "Tomorrow we will finish the small details," he said, "but tonight you have a home that will stand against any storm." Sam looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight, men and women who had labored all day for no reward except the satisfaction of helping someone who had shown kindness to one of their own. He felt something shift inside him, a walls crumbling that he hadn't even realized he had built. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You already have," Naiche replied. "Every time you look at this home, remember that it was built by hearts grateful for your kindness. And perhaps when you meet other travelers lost in storms, you will remember that we are all the same beneath the sky." As the Apache prepared to rest for the night, setting up temporary shelters around Sam's property, Ayana approached him one more time. In her hands, she held a small piece of pottery, a bowl, Sam realized, identical to the one he had used to give her broth during the storm. "So you will remember," she said simply, "that sharing food with a stranger is the same as sharing love with family." Sam accepted the bowl with hands that trembled slightly, understanding that he was being given more than a simple gift. He was being welcomed into a tradition, a way of seeing the world that valued kindness above all else. That night, as Sam lay in his transformed home listening to the gentle sounds of the Apache camp settling for the night, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he belonged somewhere, like he was part of something larger than himself. The storm had brought him more than just a girl to save. It had brought him a new understanding of what it meant to be human. The morning sun rose over a landscape that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Sam woke in his transformed home, momentarily disoriented by the warmth and comfort that surrounded him. The walls no longer groaned with the desert wind, and sunlight streamed through properly fitted windows, casting patterns of light and shadow that danced across the smooth wooden floors. Outside he could hear the gentle sounds of the Apache camp coming to life, quiet conversations, the soft whinny of horses, the distant laughter of children. Sam dressed quickly and stepped outside, still amazed by the miracle that had occurred in less than 24 hours. The sight that greeted him was even more remarkable in the full light of day. His cabin had been completely transformed into something that belonged in the pages of a storybook. The new roof gleamed with terracotta tiles that caught the morning light like burnished copper. The walls, reinforced and expanded, now featured carved details that spoke of both strength and artistry. A covered porch ran along the front of the house, supported by posts that had been decorated with traditional Apache symbols of protection and prosperity. But it was the garden that truly took Sam's breath away. Where once there had been only bare earth and struggling sage, the Apache women had created a small oasis. They had built raised beds filled with rich soil, planted with herbs and vegetables that would thrive in the desert climate. A small irrigation system, fed by a spring they had somehow located and tapped, ensured that the plants would survive even during the driest months. Naiche approached, his weathered face creased with satisfaction as he surveyed the night's work. "A home should feed both body and spirit," he said. "This garden will provide for you long after we have returned to our own lands." Sam walked through the garden in wonder, recognizing some plants, but marveling at others he had never seen before. Ayana appeared beside him, her young face bright with enthusiasm. "These are healing plants," she explained, pointing to a section filled with unfamiliar herbs. "My grandmother taught me about them. This one helps with headaches. This one with stomach pain, and this one," she pointed to a plant with silvery leaves, "this one helps lonely hearts remember how to be happy." Sam knelt beside the plant, its leaves soft beneath his fingers. "And you think I have a lonely heart?" Ayana considered this with the seriousness that only children can bring to such questions. "You did," she said finally, "but not anymore. Now you have a whole tribe of friends." The simple truth of her words struck Sam deeply. For 5 years he had convinced himself that solitude was enough, that a man could live entirely apart from others and find contentment. But the events of the past day had shown him how wrong he had been. The warmth he felt now, surrounded by people who had labored to improve his life, was something he had forgotten existed. As the morning progressed, the Apache completed the final touches on Sam's home. The men installed shutters on the windows, carved and painted with protective symbols. The women hung textiles they had woven during the night, transforming the interior into something that was both comfortable and beautiful. Even the children contributed, gathering smooth stones from the desert to create paths through the garden. But perhaps the most significant addition was the one that appeared last. A group of younger Apache men approached carrying a wooden sign, beautifully carved and painted. They mounted it beside the front door, and Sam read the words with growing emotion. Casa de Amistad, House of Friendship. Below the Spanish words, painted in Apache symbols, was a message that Ayana translated for him. All travelers welcome, food and shelter shared with glad hearts. Now everyone will know, Nietzsche said, that this is a place where kindness lives. And perhaps when others face storms, they will remember that help can come from the most unexpected places. As the Apache prepared to leave, Sam felt a profound sense of loss. These people had become more than helpers, they had become family. The thought of returning to solitude, even in his beautiful new home, seemed almost unbearable. Sensing his distress, Nietzsche placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. "This is not goodbye," the chief said. "We will return with the seasons, and you will always be welcome in our camps. More than that, you now understand something that many men never learn, that the world is full of people who need help, and that helping them helps us all." Ayana ran to Sam one last time, throwing her arms around his waist in a hug that conveyed more than words ever could. "Thank you," she whispered, "for teaching me that kindness is the same in every language." As the Apache departed, Sam stood on his new porch, watching the long line of horses and people disappear into the shimmering heat of the desert. But he didn't feel alone. The house around him seemed to pulse with the love and care that had built it, and the garden before him represented a future filled with growth and possibility. That evening, as Sam prepared his first meal in his new kitchen, he heard the sound of approaching horses. His heart leaped, thinking perhaps the Apache had returned, but as the riders drew closer, he realized they were different. White settlers by the look of them, a family traveling west. The man who approached his door was thin and tired, his clothes dusty from travel. Behind him, Sam could see a woman and 2 small children, all showing the signs of hard travel and limited resources. "Evening, mister," the man said, his voice hesitant. "My name's Thomas Baker. We're headed to California, but our wagon broke down about 5 miles back. We saw your light and we wondered if you might have some water to spare, and maybe a place to rest for the night." Sam looked at the family, at the exhausted children, the worried parents, the hope and fear mingled in their eyes. He thought of Ayana, of the storm that had brought her to his door, of the kindness that had transformed his entire world. "Of course," Sam said, stepping aside to welcome them in. "Please come in. I was just preparing dinner and there's more than enough for all of us." As the Baker family entered his home, marveling at its warmth and beauty, Sam felt a deep sense of completion. The circle that had begun with a small girl lost in a storm was continuing, expanding to include new people, new opportunities for kindness and connection. Later that night, as the Baker family slept safely in his home, Sam sat on his porch and looked up at the stars. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, vast and seemingly empty. But Sam now understood that it was full of invisible connections, threads of kindness and compassion that linked every living thing. He thought of Ayana's words about lonely hearts learning to be happy, and he smiled. His heart was no longer lonely. It was full of gratitude, full of hope, full of the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to pass on the gift he had received. The storm had brought him a girl to save, but in saving her, he had discovered something far more valuable. He had found his way home to humanity itself, and in that discovery, he had learned that the smallest acts of kindness can indeed rebuild entire worlds. One heart, one home, one life at a time. As the night deepened and the desert settled into its ancient rhythms, Sam Morrison sat in his house of friendship, keeper of a flame that would burn for generations to come, illuminating the path for all who found themselves lost in the storms of life.